All right, so yeah, welcome to the class. So the project number 2 would be, as I said, on Tuesday, it would be automatic coding. So the objective is to classify, given a discharge summary of each admission, you need to predict. So I'm reading this part. Given a discharge summary of each admission, you need to predict all ICD-9 codes of procedures and diagnoses in that admission. So that would be, if you remember, let me just share this. If you remember the structure of EHR, which I covered in the second week or the first week. So a single hospital admission, so that is the blue strip here, the single hospital admission, it can consist of multiple ICU admissions, ICU stays. So in the project number 1, we treated each ICU admission independently, regardless of whether the ICU admissions or ICU stays were from the same hospital stay or whether they were from the same patient. Regardless of that, we just treated each ICU admission separately. This time, we're looking at the hospital admission level. So we're no longer we no longer care about the ICU related stuff. So we care about the hospital admission related stuff. So the tables that we need to care are here. So we're talking about this part. So actually, discharge summary. So discharge summary is related to the entire admission. So no matter how many ICU admissions or ICU stays there are in the hospital admission, there is only one discharge summary. So one admission, one hospital admission, or one hospital stay, one discharge summary. So that I should make that clear. But still, the discharge summary is in this table, note events table. We already covered that this Tuesday. So you need to find discharge summary from this table, and you need to find ICD-9 codes, which are billing codes. As I said, ICD-9 codes are developed for billing purposes. So ICD-9 diagnosis code and ICD-9 procedure codes are generated at the end of the hospital admission or at the end of the hospital stay. So at the time of discharge, right here, at the time of discharge here, diagnosis ICD-9 codes and procedure ICD-9 codes will be generated for you, so that you can pay the money to the hospital, and then of course the hospital can also report to CMS or insurance company, or in Korea Shinpyeongwon, to tell them what kind of services the hospital did and then get reimbursed. So that is the table you need to look at are here, diagnosis ICD and procedures ICD. So you need to look for discharge summary in here, and you need to look for the labels, diagnosis ICD and procedure ICD is here. And obviously, what the code or the ID or the key that you need to use to group those information together are HADM ID. Hopefully that is clear. So let me share my Chrome again. So if you go to note events, there are row ID, which is a unique primary key. Subject ID is the foreign key, which indicates the patient ID. HADM ID is the hospital admission ID. So this is what you need to look at. So hospital admission ID, and then there are category and description. And I said that you should look for discharge summary. So you need to look for discharge summary in the category section. So once you have a discharge summary, you need to look for the matching or the label diagnosis ICD and procedure ICD, which are in this table. Diagnosis ID ICD table, there is HADM ID. Okay, so And there could be multiple diagnosis codes given to you, to the patient, at the end of discharge. So there isn't just one row per HADM ID. There could be multiple rows that have the same HADM ID. That goes the same for procedures ICD as well. So procedure ICD is the same schema, same structure. So there's HADM ID. And then you need to look for the codes. So for both procedure ICD and diagnosis ID, what you need to look for are the codes, ICD-9 codes. Sequence number, you don't need to care about them. Sequence number are irrelevant here. All right, let's go back to the. So hopefully, the entire picture is pretty much clear to everybody. And by the way, if you have any question, you can ask anytime you want. Feel free to interrupt me. All right, so going back to the specs, so that is the overall story of project number 2. So construct a multi-label text classifier. It should be a multi-label because there are more than one diagnosis or procedure ICD codes per hospital admission per HADM ID. So it's a multi-label text classifier for prediction. And you could consider any kind of text encoder. It could be RNA, it could be a 1D-CNN that we looked at in the we looked at in last Tuesday, or it could be BERT, it could be whatever you can build, or it could be bag of words, it could be whatever you want. As long as it works, it's good. So the data set is obviously mimicry, and then the table and features. So just a bit more detailed information about the features and tables. So each patient has one or more hospital admission records, but we're gonna treat each hospital admission ID as separately. So we don't care whether the hospital admission ID comes from the same patient or not. So there could be such case like here. So there could be a case where a single patient visits hospital more than one time. So like for example, like this patient made 2 hospital stays in the mimicry data set. So there would be one HADM ID here and another HADM ID here. But we're not going to care whether they come from the same subject ID or not. We're just going to treat each HADM ID independently. So there should be one discharge summary for this and another discharge summary for this. All right. So, okay. So use the following columns from the note events table to form a patient representation vector. So what you should look at is note events table, obviously, in HADM ID. If this is null, disregard that row. You should look for category. So you should filter the rows from note events by category. So because in the category there are physicians notes, there are nursing notes, there are radiology report, there's consultation. We've looked a couple of examples from the last Tuesday. So you should look for category, discharge summary, and filter out everything else. And once you do that, but while you're doing that, you should also care about the descriptions column. So in the description for discharge summary, there are only 2 descriptions. It's either report or addendum. So this is important. So this is an end condition. So you should look for both category and description, where the category is discharge summary and description is report. So we don't care about discharge summary addendum. We're gonna throw that away. So we're gonna only use discharge summary report. Anything else, you can just throw them away. So if you've read the paper Camel, the explainable automatic coding paper that we looked at last Tuesday, what the authors of the paper did is they actually merged the report and addendum together to form a single discharge summary. But we're not going to do that. That makes everything a bit more complex, and I don't want the students to go through complex pre-processing more than necessary. So we're just going to throw all the addendum away, and we're only going to use discharge summary report. And obviously, the text column is important. So text column is where the actual text is stored, obviously. So use all or part of. It's up to you. Use all or part of the free text in this column to predict the diagnosis and procedure codes. Feel free to, and obviously your I mean, you can use whatever other kind of features you want. So you can use gender from patients, or you can use ethnicity from admissions, or you can actually use information from the ICU stay related stuff, like blood pressure or whatever, which would be, I would say, which would take a lot of time. But then if you're interested in this kind of like actually getting this like the state of the art performance for automated coding, then you can do that, but it is not necessary. We're not gonna evaluate like how well you formed the patient representation vector, or what kind of features you use. It's all up to you, right? One thing to note is actually one thing to note is you don't need to care about like information leakage from the future, because diagnosis ICD and procedure ICD are generated at the very, very end of hospital admission. So there is nothing to leak from the future, because these procedure ICD and diagnosis ICD codes are the things that happen at the very, very last time. So whether you use chart events, or whether you use ICU stays, lab events, whether you use admissions, callouts, it's really all good, because you're not using information from the future, because this is the future. This is the most latest information that you can use in this entire blue strip. So you can use whatever feature you would like to use. That's all up to you. All right. So okay, I'm switching the window too much frequently. All right. So you can use, so obviously feel free to use any feature pre-processing methods. It's all up to you. You can use words or subwords. You can tokenize the notes into words, or you can tokenize the notes into characters actually, or you can tokenize using a word piece or sentence piece or byte pairing coding. This all so it's up to you as well. And you can set the maximum sequence lengths to whichever values of your choice, because a single note in the text column, it could be really, really long. It could be more than 2,000 words or 3,000 words. So because it depends on the length of your stay. So if a patient stayed in the hospital for like 1 or 2 days, then the text part would be relatively short, because not a lot of things happen to you. And discharge summary, as I said, it's a summary of events that happened to the patient over the course of the hospital stay. So the longer the patient stayed, the longer the text would be. So if the patient stayed for like a month, which is totally possible, if the patient stayed in the hospital for a month, then text part of the discharge summary would be gigantically long. So again, it's up to you how you would like to treat them, whether you would like to set a maximum threshold, or whether you would like to just simply use bag of words approach or TF-IDF vector. That's again, it's up to you. You can use whatever imagination. You can use whatever. You can use your imagination as much as you want. All right. So the things to consider while you're generating the feature vector, or while you're pre-processing the text part, is the sequence length, obviously. So the number of words in each discharge summary might be too long for some model. For example, like BERT, if I remember correctly, BERT is designed to handle 512 sequence length. So, and especially BERT, it would be using subwords rather than words. So 512 subword tokens, which is shorter, which is not equal to the 512 word tokens. So in that case, what would you do? Unknown words is also could be an issue. So for example, if your training data does not include some word, but your test data does, then how are you going to handle that? Case sensitive or case insensitive. So you can use either the original or lowercase words. So you can just treat the text as they are, and or you can just lowercase them all and then try to decrease the input feature space. And obviously what you would like to, there are obviously way more things to consider as well. How you would like to handle like special cases, like high dashes or slashes or dots, or periods or question marks, how you'd like to handle them. Numbers are also things to consider. So typically what people do with numbers in text is to just convert them to a special character called numbers, or just set all numbers to zeros or ones so that the numbers themselves don't mean too much. But in this case, you might want to consider how you'd like to treat the numbers, just to leave them as they are, or or if you use subwords, then they would be cut into seemingly random subparts, like sub numbers. So that's all up to you. All right, and as I said, labels. So in this assignment, you don't need to care about the subject ID. You don't need to care about the ICU stay ID. You don't need to care about anything else rather than just the hospital admission ID, which is HADM ID. So you need to extract all this pair from diagnosis ICD table. So HADM ID, which is the hospital admission ID, and the codes in the diagnosis, the codes would be diagnosis codes in the diagnosis ICD table. So as I said, there could be more than just a one row per HADM ID. So actually, let me show you an example. Right. So there are a lot of tables, so I'm going to look at diagnosis ICD and the HADM ID. So the third column is HADM ID, and then we can start with this guy. So there are how many? There are 14 codes. So there is ICD-9 codes. So 14 diagnosis ICD-9 codes assigned for this hospital admission ID. So let me see if there are actually any more. So there are 14, and nope, that's it. Yeah, so 14 diagnosis codes assigned to this patient at this hospital admission ID. So you need to extract them so that you can construct a multi-label label, basically. And you need to go to the same procedures ICD. Yeah. So for this hospital admission ID, there is only one procedure code assigned to this patient. So that what you need to do is go to both tables, diagnosis ICD table here, and procedures ICD table here, and extract all the ICD codes, but one would be diagnosis code, one would be procedure code. So extract all codes, all pairs of HADM ID and codes, and then you can construct a multi-label setting. All right. So that's the label, and yeah. Then consider all the ICD-9 codes as of each HADM ID as a label, and you can get the total if you want to. So actually, the label space is rather fixed. If you think about the maximum size of your maximum label size is fixed because there are only a finite number of procedure ICD-9 codes and diagnosis ICD-9 codes. So if I remember correctly, there are about 14,000 ICD-9 diagnosis codes and maybe a few thousand, maybe 5,000 or 4,000 number of procedures ICD-9 codes. But then the actual label space will be smaller than that because we're actually filtering out any, actually, no, we're not filtering out anything. We're not filtering out any patients or anybody. So practically we would be covering the entire ICD-9 diagnosis ICD-9 table and the procedures ICD-9 table. So you can get the total number of ICD-9 mimic3 and mimic3 at here in the dictionary and here in the procedures dictionary. So again, let me just share that. So if you go to the dictionary ICD-9 diagnosis, how many rows there are? There are 14,568 lines. So that means there are about 14,000 unique diagnosis codes. So for example, usually diagnosis code, the ICD-9 diagnosis codes consist of 3-digit, digits in the first part, and not like the maximum, like 1 or 2 digits in the subdecimal part. So this would be 011.70. This would be 011.71. And if you go to the last, maybe like here, this will be 669.41, and this will be 670.34, something like that. And if you go to the ICD procedures, there are about 4,000. So exactly 3,883 unique number of procedure ICD-9 codes. And as I said, it's the same. They follow the same system. So this would be like 095.9 or something like that. I guess the maximum number of digits in procedure ICD-9 code are 4 digits instead of 5 digits like diagnosis ICD codes. So yeah. So the maximum number, or the maximum space, the label space is fixed. So it would be 14,000 plus 4,000, which would be 18,000. IC procedure plus diagnosis IC9 space. So that could be your label space. Okay. So that could be your label space, and you can and it will be multi-label. So per HADM ID, you can construct a 18,000 dimensional vector. 18,000 dimensional vector where everything, where all the dimensions are 0 except for the dimensions that corresponds to the positive label for that HADM ID, and you should indicate that with 1. So it would be a instead of a one hot vector, this would be a multi-hot vector because it's a multi-label classification setting. So data split is the same. So hospital admission records would so anything that ends, all the HADM ID that ends with digit 8 or 9 should be left out as a test set, and all the ones that start all the ones that ends with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 can be used as the training set. So that is the same as project number 1. Data format. So this is a bit simplified compared to project number 1, because in project number 1, when you actually had to train both logistic regression and RNN, but this time we'll be training whatever model that you would like to use, and just one model only. So there would be only one set of just one set of features and labels. So you can preprocess MIG3 so that your preprocessing code produces xtrain.csv and xtest.csv. So this would be features for training set and features for test set. And as I said, input features must contain the actual input of your test model.py. So your training, your features would be used in the test model. And this could be the line-by-line text file of discharge summary, or NPY or NumPy file of the embedded token. So you can store even though the extension, the 파일 확장자가, even though the extension is CSV here, the contents could be actually anything. It could be a pure text that you preprocess, or it could be actual tensors or NumPy vectors, NumPy ND-array vector. It could be anything you want. It just needs to be loaded inside. It should be just loadable inside your testing script, and that's it. And you can consider other features and store in any format, and will not evaluate. As I said, will not evaluate how well you preprocess the input features. That's irrelevant. These are the label files. So this is actually what we're going to evaluate on. So ytrain is the label for the training set. Ytest is label for the test sets. And so these are the format of this file. These files are fixed. So each row should look exactly like this, where each row consists of HADM ID followed by multi-labels, all comma separated. So it should look like this. So should start with HADM ID, and then it is followed by all the zeros and ones that indicates multi-label labels. And how we're going to evaluate is to look for the labels. Look for the HADM ID, and then count how many positive labels there are for this HADM ID, and then If you've got the correct number, then that is like a point for you. Just like, project number 1, where you had to come up with approximately the same number, approximately the exact number of labels for train and test files. All right, it must be a text format, obviously, and in order to confirm that as I said, in order to confirm that you've preprocessed the data set correctly, we'll check the number of positive. We'll only check the positive labels. Negative, we won't care about the number of zeros. So we'll only care about the number of ones in this HA-ID in both Y-train and Y-test. So that is part of the evaluation. Modeling and evaluation. Use whatever model you would prefer. It's all up to you. We're going to evaluate based on AURC and AUPRC, and since this is a multi-label classification, we're going to measure both macro and micro. So macro AURC, micro AURC, and macro AUPRC and micro AUPRC. And you already know which function to use for AUPRC and AURC. Okay, so I think there's a question. Y는 CSV 포맷으로 제출해야 되나요? 이게 다 지금 CSV라고 파일 확장자가 써 있는데 사실은 텍스트이기만 하면 됩니다. Ytrain이랑 Ytest는 텍스트여야 돼요. 그러니까 위에 컬럼 이름이 없어야 돼요. 맨 첫 줄이, 보통 CSV 포맷은 맨 첫 줄이 이제 컬럼 이름들이 이렇게 있잖아요. 그게 아니라 그냥 텍스트입니다. 텍스트. 네. 네, 좋습니다. Alright, so what to submit? X도 동일한 거예요. 네, X도 제가 말씀드렸듯이 확장자가 중요하지가 않아요. 이게 사실 CSV로만 썼지만 사실 그냥 내용물은 뭐가 돼도 상관이 없습니다. 내용물은 뭐 텍스트여도 되고 아니면은 뭐가 되든 어쨌든 간에 여러분이 짜실 그 테스트 스크립트가 있을 거 아니에요. 그 스크립트에서 읽어가지고 처리만 할 수 있으면 상관이 없습니다. 네. 그래서 뭐 이게 넘파이 포맷이어도 되고 뭐 실제로 무슨 TF 레코드에 해당하는 파이토치도 뭔가 있겠죠. 뭐 그런 걸 저장해도 되고 텍스트를 저장해도 되고 뭐 마음대로 하셔도 됩니다. All right, so what to submit? Feature and label files. Obviously, you need to submit these files. So Xtrain, Xtest, Ytrain, and Ytest. So you need to submit those files, and then these files should be located. It's all the same it's the same as the project number 1. So all these files should be located in the same directory as other files. Do not make any subdirectories. Model parameter. Obviously, you need to train your model first, and then dump the weights, and then or save the weights or save the parameters, and then you can submit them along with other files. And your test script should be able to call them and load them and then evaluate. So again, same directory, do not make any subdirectories, and test model.py. So this is the test script. So code to evaluate prediction model, and these files should be used here. And obviously the model weights should also be loadable inside this test script. Command must be this only. So just Python test model.py, and there should be no arguments required. Everything should be hard-coded, and they should be loadable inside the script. Question from Sorrow. So are labels binary encoded? Yes, they are. So it's either 0 or 1, as shown here. But it's a multi-label label. Right. Again, so the command must be this without any arguments, and load your dataset and model parameters inside your code using a relative path. And your code should generate the same as before. But before we generated like student ID, logistic txt, and RNN txt. But this time there is only one model. So it's just your student ID and underscore model.txt, and that's it. So such as like an example would be like this. In your current directory that has the same student ID, and what you need to print out in the text file is this. There should be 4 lines. So it should start with your student ID, followed by test macro AURC. So test macro AURC, test micro AURC, test macro AUPRC, and test micro AUPRC in order. And that's it. So actually, you should note that you shouldn't print out any training evaluation performance. So actually, Xtrain and Ytrain is you don't have to load them in your test model file. What you should load is test x test npy, and actually this is there's a typo. This should be CSV. For consistency purposes, this should be CSV. Actually, just let me just clarify that this is a TXT. Just clarifying that the Y labels file should be text file. And this could be, actually, this could be NP1. Let's just call them NP1. But it can be anything. And here, so right now we have a consistent notation. All right, so again, as I said, so since we are not printing out, or we're not evaluating the training performance, you should only print out test performances, as shown here: test micro macro AURC, test macro micro AUPRC. So what I'm saying is your test model script should not they should not have to load this and this. It should only load this and this, so that you can print out these lines. But you should still submit these. At least you should, yeah, you should still submit these, and especially this, because we are going to, especially this, because we're going to evaluate how well you pre-process data set using the label files. So you should still submit everything. All right, and zip all the files into this form. So student tarball gunzip, and then when unzipped the tarball gunzip file, the folder name should be your student ID. So hopefully this is very clear. Assignment evaluation. So if you submit all codes and files, so even if you just submit files and codes, then you get 5 points. So hopefully nobody gets 0 points. There was actually, if I remember correctly, like 1 or 2 students who actually did get 0 points in project number 1. So it means that they didn't even submit the codes and files. I'm trying to really give you all the points, but so please try to make minimum effort to get 5 points. Like if you submit anything, like even if like empty files, that's fine. I'm just like giving away 5 points. So please do that. And then if you correctly pre-process maybe 3. So if you correctly pre-process the labels, then your points would be 10 points. So the number of positive labels, the number of ones per ADM ID are the evaluation criteria. So if you get them right, you'll get 10 points. If your model shows reasonable performance, it'll be 15 points. So the reasonable performance will be announced by sometime next week by the TAs. If you remember the previous the material from Tuesday, the micro AURC for automated coding was like somewhere around 98%, but that would be really high. So something lower than that would be a reasonable performance, maybe 90% or 85%. But the micro AURC would be relatively easy to achieve. Like high micro AURC would be relatively easy to achieve, because micro AURC is based on so it is based on it is a weighted sum or weighted average based on the frequency of the label. So for example, if hypertension is the most frequent labels in the entire multi-label space, then all you need to do is just be really accurate about predicting hypertension, and then you would get really high micro AURC. So so high micro AURC is relatively easy to achieve, but still like 98% would be a bit too much, because that's actual paper in NACL. So a reasonable performance would be somewhere below maybe 85 to 90% range. But that would be the exact number would be announced by the TAs sometime next week, as I said. And obviously, if you outperform TA, it will be 20 points, and no late submissions. So if you're late, no late. If you're late, then we're not accepting that. TA email addresses are this. So the TAs, please note that the TAs have changed. So now it's Seongjin Park and Seongjin Yang. All right, so hopefully this is clear to everybody. Are there any questions? How many people are, so 34 attendings. All right. I guess about half the enrollees are here. Oh, actually, yeah, that's a good question. When is the deadline? Actually, I haven't talked about the deadline. So this is, okay, so that concerns another, like the second option for doing project 2 and 3, which is actual individual research. So I'm going to give you guys some time to come up with a research topic until next Tuesday. So so it would be fair for other people. So it would be fair for people who focus on project number 2 rather than coming up with their own individual research topic. It will be fair for them to as well start from next Tuesday. So I'm going to give you guys 2 weeks from that, from next Tuesday, which would be, so next Tuesday is May 4th. So actually May 4th is, if there's any Star Wars fan here, May 4th is special day. All right, so May 4th, 2 weeks from that is May 18th. So May 18th is the deadline. And obviously, so those who are, so this is, so as I said, people who got a decent amount of score in project number 1, they're free to suggest it. I'm not going to guarantee that they can do whatever individual research they would like to do, but they can suggest that they would like to do individual research with something, at least something marginally relevant to healthcare topic. It should be machine learning plus healthcare. So they can suggest their own topic that kind of has the same amount of, that requires same amount of effort as a combination of project number 2 and 3, where the project number 2 is automatic coding, as you see here, and project number 3 would be image classification using chest X-ray images. So the individual research that you would suggest to me would have to be like this. It would require at least some amount of complexity. It can't be just another mortality prediction, something like that. So you are so the decent amount of score will be obviously 15 points. But if you got 14 or 14.5 points or 13.75 points, you can still try to suggest your individual research topic to me by May 4th. You can send emails to me, or you can just try to book a meeting with me. That's up to you. But the deadline is May 4th. So May 4th, you can suggest at least. Actually, no, May 4th is the deadline to decide whether you're going to do your individual research or not. So you should suggest your topic before May 4th, and then I'm going to tell you whether you can do whether you can do your individual research with that topic or not. And if not, if rejected, then you have to do project number 2 and 3. And the deadline for them is the same as everybody else, which would be, the deadline is May 18th. All right, so 다음 question from 진화님. 다음 주나 다다음 주 수업은 과제 Q&A를, 다음 주 수업은 과제 Q&A로 대체되지만 다다음 주는 또 메테리얼을 진행을 하겠죠. 저번 프로젝트 1과 똑같습니다. 프로젝트 1처럼 다음 주는 프로젝트 2를 하시면서 이제 발생하는 질문들을 이제 Q&A를 하는 거고, 다다음 주부터는 다시 수업이 나갑니다. 네. All right, so I guess that pertains to everybody. So next week would be a Q&A session for project number 2, but the week after next week, so 2 weeks from now, we're going to resume the original schedule with the material. Right, so the third phase, so the phase 1 was learning the basics of the predictive model. Phase 2 was interpretability and domain knowledge and text encoding. So it was a bit more extension of the basic prediction model. And phase 3 would be a bit more applicational. So we would look at federated learning, multimodal learning, and obviously we're going to have to deal with images as well, because the project number 3 is image classification. So it would be a bit more high-level application. Right, question from 준민님. 네, diagnosis IC 테이블에 있는 IC 코드 중 284979 같이 인트 포맷이 아닌 경우가 있는데 이 같은 경우는 배열이 대상인가요? 네, 있으면 무조건 다 고려하시면 됩니다. 이제 28497 같이 2로 시작하는, 그러니까 알파벳 2로 시작하는 ICD-9 코드는 사실 진단명은 아니고 어떻게 보면은 약간 엑스트라인데, 어, 뭐 약간 뭐 이유 같은 거거든요. 그러니까 이 진단명을 받은 이유나 뭐 병에 걸린 이유 같은 게 이제 특히 거기에 이제 많이 들어가 있거든요. 근데 뭐 상관없이 그냥 다 하시면 됩니다. So that's a good question from Junmin. So this pertains to everybody. So there are certain codes in the diagnosis ICD table, or there are certain diagnosis ICD codes that starts with alphabet E rather than all numbers, such as here in the chat box here. But so you can just include them. So don't try to pre-process them and exclude them out. That would be extra amount of work. So just treat them as the same diagnosis codes as any other diagnosis codes. So just use all diagnosis codes in the diagnosis ICD table. That goes the same with diagnosis procedures ICD code. 네, 방금 전에 이제 제가 했던 얘기, 영어로 했던 얘기를 다시 한번 한글로 할게요. 아니, 한국어로 할게요. 그러니까 프로젝트 2랑 3은 2는 지금 보셨듯이 이제 오토매틱 코딩인데 사실 뭐 그렇게 어렵진 않습니다. 제가 이렇게 어려운 프로젝트 1처럼 프리프로세싱이나 전처리가 이제 아주 많이 필요한 게 아니잖아요. 이게 딱 이제 노트 이벤트만 봐도 리즈너블한 퍼포먼스 낼 수 있을 거라고 생각을 충분히 합니다. 그래서 프로젝트 2가 그렇고 프로젝트 3도 어차피 이미지 클래시피케이션이니까 뭐 거기도 조금의 뭐 전처리가 들어가겠지만 그렇게 어렵지 않아서 원하시는 분들은 그냥 프로젝트 2랑 3를 하셔도 되고요. 그게 아니라 이제 자기 자신이 하고 싶은 연구가 있으시면은 아니면 뭐 난 논문을 쓰고 싶다 이러면은 그 주제를 그러니까 프로젝트 2, 3을 대신해서 그 주제를 가지고 진행을 하셔도 됩니다. 근데 이제 어떤 주제를 할 건지는 저랑 상의를 하셔야겠죠. 이제 뭐 너무 쉬운 걸 하면은 프로젝트 2랑 3을 하느니만 못할 정도로 쉬운 걸 하면은 그건 뭐 어떻게 보면 페어하지가 않으니까 이제 어느 정도의 난이도가 있는 주제를 하셔야겠죠. 그래서 그 주제를 가지고 저한테 제안을 하셔서 이제 이걸 하겠다 말겠다를 제안을 하셔가지고 그거를 다음 주 화요일 전까지 결론을 내셔야 됩니다. 그러니까 이제 미리미리 저한테 뭐 주말 동안이라도 이메일을 보내셔가지고 이런 주제로 하고 싶습니다. 그리고 다음에 엔드 프로덕트 이제 어떤 결과물이 나올 거다 또는 뭐 그런 스펙 같은 거를 저한테 이메일로 설명을 해주셔가지고 제가 보기 괜찮으면은 그거를 진행하시면 되고요. 그게 아니고 이제 영 아니다 그러면 새로운 주제를 제안하시든가 아니면 그냥 프로젝트 2, 3을 하시던가 그렇게 하시면 돼요. 그래서 데드라인이 그러니까 이제 개별 프로젝트를 하실 건지 말 건지 데드라인이 프로젝트 4일, 5월 4일입니다. 그 전까지 저한테 열심히 메일을 보내시면 됩니다. 네. 그리고 이제 아무나 하실 수 있는 게 아니라 프로젝트 1을 해가지고 적당하게 좋은 스코어를 내신 분들에 한해서요. 프로젝트 1이 8점이 나왔다, 7점이 나왔다 이런 분들은 애초에 뭐 어떤 기본적인 기본기가 부족하다라는 판단을 하고서 이제 그분들은 프로젝트 2, 3을 하시는 게 좋을 것 같고요. 이제 나중을 위해서라도. 이제 뭐 이미 만점을 20점을 받아버렸다. 또 뭐 15점 이상을 받았으면 충분히 이제 2, 3을 하지 않으셔도 개별 프로젝트를 하도 된다는 어떤 뭐 수준에 이르렀다고 판단하에 이제 그런 분들에 한해서 개별 프로젝트를 할 수 있는 옵션을 드리는 겁니다. 근데 뭐 나는 14.75점이 나왔어요. 뭐 억울해요. 이런 분들은 뭐 여전히 저한테 제안을 하셔도 돼요. 이제 뭐 그 정도면 받을 수 있으니까. 어쨌든 주제만 좋으면은 이제 그 정도를 뭐 약간 모자란 점수를 받은 분들도 얼마든지 제안을 하실 수 있다. 네. 혹시 이에 대해서 질문 있으신가요? 네. 그럼 뭐 프로젝트 2에 그럼 옵션 말고 프로젝트 2 자체에 대해서도 더 이상 질문이 없는 것 같은데 맞나요? 네, 이미 프로젝트 1을 한번 해보셔가지고 프로젝트 2는 상대적으로 쉽다고 생각하고요. 쉽기를 바랍니다. 아, 네, 현진님. 그러니까 이제 그러니까 프로젝트를 제안하실 때 엔드 프로덕트가 뭐일지를 같이 제안을 하셔야 돼요. 뭐 논문을 쓰겠다, 아니면 뭐 모델을 만들겠다, 뭐 아니면 뭐 소타를 찍겠다, 뭐 하여튼 뭔가 이제 그 엔드 프로덕트를 직접 제안을 하셔야죠. 이제 스펙을. 그러고 이제 그걸 맞추면은 그건 이제 그럼 뭐 훌륭하게 통과하신 거니까. 특히나 이제 좀 잘 된 것들은 나중에 뭐 학생들 앞에서 발표를 하실 수도 있을 것 같고요. 네. 그러니까 자신이 생각하기에 프로젝트 2, 3을 하는 것만큼의 노력을 이 드릴 만한 어떤 인디비주얼 리서치 토픽이 있으면 그걸 하시고 이제 제안을 하실 때 이제 어떤 평가, 뭐 어떤 산출물이 나올 거다라는 걸 이제 제안을 하시면 됩니다. 가장 쉬운 거는 아마도 뭐 워크숍 페이퍼 하나 정도, 그러니까 4페이지짜리 페이퍼 하나가 나올 정도의 프로젝트를 하면은 뭐 충분히 괜찮아요. All right. So what I just described in Korean was that so as I said, if you decide to do your own projects, then it should not be too easy. Like, as I said, like the simple prediction model is probably not enough. It's insufficient. So you should propose so, something that has a same amount of complexity as doing project 2 and 3 at the same time. So a typical example would be the end product being a four-page workshop paper, or something that amounts to a workshop paper. So if you decide to do an individual research project that amounts to, or that could lead to it eventually a workshop submission, I guess that could be a reasonable or reasonable output criteria. Okay, so if there are no more questions, I guess we can end the class rather early today. Um, all right, so yeah, if you have any follow-up questions, you can ask them on Classroom as usual, or send me an email, or actually send the TA's emails as well, because the TAs and we work together to come up with this spec, so they can also answer your question. So, all right. So as I said, the starting date of this project is next Tuesday. But if you would like to ask questions, so because the next week will be Q&A session, so if you would like to ask like meaningful, helpful questions, you should actually get started as soon as possible. So, but as I said, the deadline is May 18th. So please work on your own schedule. All right. Have a good weekend. I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Bye bye.